All right. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We are on part 9. We left off last week finishing how to enter service lines. So now we're going to just talk a little bit about flow of services. So there's a little bit of terminology. Some of this, again, is repeat terminology. We call inquirers the folks who are not yet enrolled, but they're seeking information and preparing to apply it for our program. Some of them never do end up applying, but they inquire at any level of interest they may have, whether that be with you as the youth grantee or at a job center. They're seeking information. How do I, what do I do, kind of thing prior to the enrollment process. Participants is the term for customers who are enrolled in one of the programs for the purposes of funded sources. So that's after enrollment, we call them participants. An open file, that's an enrollment under a program in Alaska Jobs that has a number and the status of complete. Closed file, that's an enrollment under a program in Alaska Jobs that has a number and the status of closed. And exited file, this is an enrollment under a program in Alaska Jobs that has a number and a status of exited. And one of the things, and I have to give Leslie a thank you on this one, was that she asked for an update to be made in Alaska Jobs where it wouldn't just say exited, but it would say if it was in follow-up in red in that ribbon that shows the Alaska Jobs program number and the status of exited. So it will kind of stand out for folks that are taking a look at that. Okay, a follow-up. This is a required activity that takes place for 4 quarters after exit on all exited files that were not exited for global exclusion. And those 4 quarters do not include the quarter for which the participant actually exited. So they'll exit within a quarter, a calendar quarter, and then the first quarter after the exit quarter is the first of 4 during the follow-up. So we don't count the exit quarter as one of the follow-ups. Although it's pretty important to start that follow-up then, especially if the participant gained employment or was going on to higher education, just to check in and make sure that things are going okay for them, give them any coaching or counseling that might be necessary. Pre-screening, that's a process that occurs when an inquirer is seeking the next steps and potentially applying for WIOA programs. It's kind of where you say, does it appear this person may be eligible? And if so, I'm going to tell them the next steps to do in order to come back and potentially become enrolled. Intake or enrollment, those are terms that we've used synonymously over the years. And it means that process of accepting all those eligibility and data validation documents, doing a comprehensive objective assessment, creating, accepting and completing that program application and any necessary paperwork to actually enroll them by data entry into Alaska Jobs to make them complete. They are now our participant. All right, first things first is inquirers. This is any customer that wants to ask about our program. They're looking for that information, and it is our duty to provide them an explanation of the next steps to apply because it's public information. It's not private about how we administer our grant funds. The 2 bullets under there that say basic skills deficiency screening tool and pre-screening questionnaire completed or pre-assessment, I'm not sure if the youth programs use those. Those are job center forms, I know, but I'm not sure. Leslie, can you chime in and tell me if those are something that are required by grantees?
I don't know about required, but I do know most of the grantees have a sort of pre-screening questionnaire or assessment that they use. And then for basic skills, it's not a standard tool, but if a youth, if identifies as a basic skills deficient, deficiency as an eligibility criteria, we must have a standardized assessment showing that.
Like the tape or something. Okay,
Yes.
so that's what differs at the job center level, and I'm sorry that this may look like it was towards the job center, but that's how these were initially created. We use a screening tool because we don't have the ability to tabe here, and we also don't serve youth, so we don't have to tabe here. So then that's also reviewing the next steps to ensure your customer has an idea of can they obtain what you're asking them to obtain for their data validation or eligibility. And if it is a data validation element and it's going to be difficult for them to get it and it can be self-attested, then you could see if there's a different source document they could get or use that self-attestation as they come back and apply. So it's always good to let them know what they need in advance and then ask them, will there be any trouble getting any of these things? Will it be burdensome? Will it take a very long time? Do you not have that document or access to the document? And then determining right then and there if you can self-attest to it for the items that would be a burden. So they're not, so they know then that maybe that's something they don't have to get. You can cross it off their list. So it's also really important to help them understand they are not yet enrolled. They are not yet a customer. They're still an inquirer, and that we can't pay for anything that funds were due or expended by themselves or another entity that they were hoping to get reimbursed before that full enrollment and the signed ISS. This is something that over the years I've noticed has happened at the job center level where folks, because they filled out some paperwork and went through some processes and are building a rapport with a case manager, they think that they're ready to go. And sometimes that confusion can cause a little bit of heartache. So this is where we're making sure that they understand that there is a next step and that they are not enrolled and not to jump into any financial pieces with them because we wouldn't be able to reimburse or assist if that money was already due. Any questions so far? Okay. What comes next? Again, these slides were created originally for Job Center, so we would advise people to update that basic skills deficiency screening tool and pre-screening questionnaire into the document section. You will use whatever tools you use for uploading into the document section. Like if someone identified their basic skills deficient, you did a TABE, you would want to enter that information into the document section, and any pre-screening you may have done or to-do lists or that kind of thing. If it was a document, input it. If it was a conversation or an email, it could be case noted. Respond promptly to further inquiries and document in the case notes section of Alaska Jobs. This is important because sometimes when we make that initial contact, even if it's been a couple of contacts, that we're responding when someone reaches out. So they know that they do have someone in their corner, that there is someone that wants to talk to them and help them move forward along their plan. As well as because it is federal grant money, our job is to respond. Once a customer states they have all their required documents, that's when you want to schedule that time that's just for them to come in wherever possible. I recognize that sometimes people can't physically come in and they might have to send documents, and you might have phone conversations or Zoom or Team or other ways to communicate. But wherever possible, it's nice to have that person come in person if they can. It helps build rapport. It also helps you make an appropriate assessment to see what they look like, if they appear to be under the influence, if they have clean clothes, or if they've brushed their hair, those kinds of things. So you could maybe identify anything else that you could be assisting with. But you're going to schedule that time and you're going to let them know this time is just for you to please be on time and bring all of these things with you to your appointment. And sometimes when you let them know that this time is scheduled just for them, that makes them feel a little more at ease and that they understand that their information is important to you. Okay, so after an inquiry, you could become a participant. So at the time of the intake, that's where you're reviewing all the documents, you're doing your objective assessment interview, you're documenting, you're providing additional forms or paperwork that may need to be completed. Um, this is if that eligibility is determined at that time and they appear to be suitable and appropriate for your program, you can move on to that next step. If additional documents are needed or they forgot something, you can request that additional information and case note. Maybe you give them something written, like a new to-do checklist of what is missing. Maybe you email them, maybe you tell them, maybe you do a combination, but it should be noted somewhere why the process was stopped if you thought you were going to be moving forward or what might be missing and then can move forward. If you have everything you need at that time, you can give them their program application, a participant agreement. I don't know if you guys use any support service agreements, but these are all things that that could be utilized in order to move them forward in that enrollment process. If they're in person with you and you have the opportunity while they're filling out those forms, you could be starting to prepare your ISS. So in an ideal situation, you may be able to sign it at the end of the appointment. This is not always going to happen that way. Sometimes there's so many meetings that are happening during assessment, depending on your participant, their background, their resources, obstacles that they may be experiencing. Also, if they're not a minor and they need a parent or guardian there, sometimes that can't just happen in the same day. But you want to review all those forms, make corrections as necessary, and then sign that ISS together. Once they sign that ISS with you, they are a full participant. You can start counting money towards them, expending funds on them, whatever that may be. So they go from inquire, asking about the program, and being then asked. We ask them to provide us with information. Then they get their specialized appointment one-on-one. And then many times from there, whether it be one appointment, two, three, however many it would take based on their individual circumstance, they could then become an enrolled participant. Any questions so far? Okay.
Nothing in the
Um,
chat.
okay, thanks, Leslie. Progression. You need to ensure your customer gets a copy of any participant agreements that you have. If you have support service agreements, make sure that they get a copy of what they've signed. And always that EEO complaint form, that should be handed to them in tandem with the application because they should be saying that, yes, they got it at that last page of their application. And then discuss those next steps, the regular contact, whether that be through Sarah coming in, email, text, phone, whatever it is that's going to be established, or a combination of things to be established with regular contact, helping them understand what types of things they would need to update for. And then, of course, other regular contact if it's monthly or if it's and if you get a new phone number or and if this changes. Leslie?
Yes, I saw, I think on day one, uh, you had mentioned that something about your staff. It was one of the PowerPoints. They engage weekly or monthly, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the options. Can you just talk more about like their regular contact? I have not established anything yet. I've been just trying to learn the process, but I have not seen a standard for the youth to like engage. And I see some grantees engage like, monthly, but some are engaging like what longer. Can you just tell me what you set up with the job centers? Because I remember again, a PowerPoint says weekly or monthly. What's the options?
Okay, so when someone has just become enrolled, if they're at training, The rule of thumb is to contact them either after the first day of training or within the first week. And that goes for new employment as well, because we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to tell us what went wrong, what went right, and then help them with some open-ended questions. What can you do tomorrow that will be different? So maybe if they were late, or if they forgot to pack a lunch and they were hungry, so they were grumpy or something. So we can talk about what can you do to make things different next time. And we could also hear their successes of what went right, or if they made a friend or that kind of thing. So that goes for training and employment at the onset. It should be early, reaching out either after the first day of that activity or at least within the first week. After that, the standard for adults is a minimum of one time per month, and that is the gold standard by the federal definition as well. Is they want us to be having monthly contact, whether we're reaching out to them or the customers reaching out to us. But you will find that you have some customers that you need to be in closer contact with, depending on what kind of obstacles that they're dealing with, or what kind of support system that they have at home, or if they're homeless, what their support system may be. So one of the things with youth, and the reason that we're looking at the high risk youth population, is because they generally need much more support than an adult or dislocated worker customer, because generally they have more barriers, and maybe they didn't have the support they needed during some critical times during their development. And so they're still needing some coaching or support. So the rule of thumb is monthly. You must have contact at least monthly. Now, I get that things are going to happen, right? You're going to leave a message, they're going to leave a message back to you, whatever it might be. You might have to reach out to them 5 or 6 times. You might have to call their permanent contact. There's a number of things that could happen where you aren't hearing from your youth. But if you're not hearing from them each month, that's what the feds consider the start ticking of the 90-day clock, that they are not participating. So it's important to have something in place to help them to contact you. So Sarah is one of those things, semi-autonomous research assistant, email, texting, phone calls, whatever it might be. And it could just be that you're reaching out saying, hey, I'm checking in with you. Last time we spoke, you said that your class was going really well, and I wanted to see if there have been any recent struggles and something that I may be able to help you with. Or can you tell me what the most favorite thing you learned was over the past month? You can ask them a question to let them know that you are interested, um, and going from there. So Leslie, you'll need to put in whatever your guidance is going to be for youth, but I will caution you, it should be a minimum of one time a month, which is usually the standard. With adults, we do it once a month. We have a check-in and there's a case note, but we also find that with some adults, we are needing to be in contact much more often because lives are messy. And one thing may have happened after another, and that's a good time to be coaching them, letting them know that this isn't their bad luck, that this is just how life works. There's always something going on in life, and it's part of its perspective. So counseling and coaching should be happening, but especially with youth at the beginnings of them starting some of these activities, because they may already be very far out of their comfort zone or not have the tools of how to cope and gain resiliency. So you'll have to write your own guidance on that, Leslie, but minimum of once a month is the federal rule. Okay. 14 basic elements. We're letting them know some of the types of services that they will be engaging in, and making sure that they understand what the expectations are for service engagement. We want them to know, if they're going to training, what we expect for measurable skill gains and credentials, that we're going to need them to be sharing that information with us. We may let them know if we have them do any kind of financial plan and we're providing support, that there may be times when we ask for an updated financial plan. That usually happens either at the onset of a new training term or semester, when permanent fund dividends come out, if they're getting tax return money, those types of things. And I'll give you the job center philosophy is not that we say, we won't help you if you have some money coming in. We want to know what their plan is for that additional funding coming into their household or to them directly. Some people have a great plan and they say, well, I'm going to buy a car, or I'm going to pay my car insurance and my electricity in advance, or I need to buy tires for my car, or they have children that they need to pay some additional expenses. But we want to know that it's being used reasonably. And if they don't have reasonable plans, we might say, our expectation is, because we've been providing you a bus pass every month, that you take some of this money and set it aside. And now you pay for your own bus pass over the next 6 months, whatever it might be. But it's a good time to be coaching them on that financial literacy piece too, so they understand, when you get a chunk of money in, it's not necessarily playtime, that there could be responsibilities that they could be asking our program for, or something that could otherwise help them move forward with their goals. Sarah, that's a semi-autonomous research assistant. Leslie will be working on that process and the guidance for how youth grantees will use it. If you don't have access yet, you don't need to, you, you guys don't create the same type of authorizations that we do, but you will need to let them know that that you as an agency need to authorize things in advance, that they'll get some kind of a purchase order or some type of thing that is authorizing them to attend school or buy clothing or whatever it might be, that they also need to be coached on their emergency, or their poor planning may not be your emergency, and that there's other customers, and so it's not realistic to call and say, in 5 minutes, I need to catch the bus and I don't have my bus pass. So this is a time for coaching them about planning ahead for costs that you may be able to cover through your grant. That doesn't mean it's always going to work like that, right? Youth and adults are alike in that way, that sometimes they forget, or they run out of time, or whatever it is, and now it's more of an urgent need. And sometimes we can assist and sometimes we can't. You'll need to make sure that they understand, if you've said you were going to reimburse them, that they have to provide you a receipt. They can't just say that they spent $50 on X thing and really they got it as a gift from someone. We need to see the receipt of why they would need to be reimbursed. So those are generally accepted accounting principles. And because this is federal money, we want to make sure that we are accounting for every penny and making sure that that is correctly documented. Any questions so far? Okay, enroll your participant in Alaska Jobs. That's typing in all of that information, entering the data, making those hyperlinks, ensuring that data validation and eligibility documents are linked appropriately and in the document section attached, making sure any case notes are necessary, participation, training justification if applicable, and any other service lines you're planning at that time. And then if you have Sarah, then you would also enroll your participant in Sarah, and you'd be having that discussion with them of what it is, what the expectations are. Once you get it, because it also can go through a text service, whenever I would have a participant and I would enroll them in Sarah, there's a spot where you can say push now, like send this prompt now for them to accept Sarah. And I would do that while they were at my desk, so they could do that then, so they knew what it looked like, and kind of coaching them from there. Case management. Again, you can utilize Sarah and Alaska Jobs alerts and reports to manage that enrollment through participation and follow-up. Ensure all your services are entered and closed in a timely manner. Create case notes, measurable skill gains, and credentials as necessary. I know this says create authorizations in a timely manner, but I know you guys don't do that in the system. Update service dates, budgets as necessary. Enter any financial aid where applicable. Again, the requirement is for Pell Grant, but you can enter any additional financial aids that you wish. If you have a financial plan or you're reviewing someone's finances as you're assisting them with supports, you might need to get updates as needed, and then provide referrals or new services as things change with that customer situation. Remembering that they're an individual and that they many times will talk amongst themselves, that should have no bearing on any individual services that you do or do not provide to each customer. And then, of course, entering those required follow-ups at the end. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions or anything in the chat, Leslie. Nothing in the chat?
Nothing is in the chat.
Okay, closing the case. Once all your services have been provided, it is time to close the case in Alaska Jobs. This is happening before exit. We're prepping it for exit by closing it. Ensure all your dates are accurate. This is a good chance to monitor your file, making sure everything lines up, that you entered those MSGs. If credentials were received, that they are entered and case notes are entered. And as a side note, you can collect credentials up to 1 year after the date of exit. So sometimes if credentials aren't received right away, you can still get those later. If that customer is employed, gather that pertinent information about their employment so you can enter that into the case closure area. Once that case is closed, but not yet exited, you can remove the closure. Your program coordinator might have to do it for you, but they can remove that closure if they're identified to need additional services, and then you can close it again once those services are completed. Now, please remember that's during the closure, but before exit. So by adding more services, you would close, and that would be extending that time moving towards the exit. If a case is closed but not yet exited and employment information was not added, and they ended up getting a job before exit, you can still enter that, and you don't need any special permissions from a program coordinator. You can simply edit and say yes for entered employment, and then add that information and then save that in the closure section. That case is going to exit after 90 days of no countable services. And remember that since we do a common exit, if they are working with a job center and getting countable services there through Wagner Pizer in the resource room, or with co-enrollment with another WIOA Title I program like adult or dislocated worker, just because you're done doesn't mean everyone is done entering their services. So the system will look between the common programs of Wagner Pizer, which is resource room services, and Title I, and decide what was the last date of countable service before 90 days has lapsed. Any questions so far? Okay. The soft exit, this is the system generated exit after there's been 90 days of no countable services across all common programs. That exit's going to happen. We call it the soft exit, and your customer moves from participant to participant in follow-up. If a soft exit occurred and you didn't have all the data entered, it can cause a number of reporting issues, which can affect our program's performance measures and may require an explanation to our project officers. So this is why we want to stay on top of our data. We want to enter it timely. If you do need someone to reopen and exit, I mean, that needs to go to your program coordinator anyway, and then they have to determine what needs to happen if an exit was reopened, because we may have already reported on that. So timely and accurate data entry is required. to avoid errors with reporting issues for that exit. Once that soft exit has occurred, the follow-up section in the program will open, allowing for those entry of 4 quarterly follow-ups. And it'll always say required by, so it'll give you an idea of when you should enter that information. Hard exit for global exclusions. You are creating this exit yourself. So you have to click in the exit section and you have to select a reason for global exclusion. So, and this is if someone doesn't have the ability to participate for more than 90 days for one of the following reasons. They were institutionalized, had health or medical, they became deceased, reservist called to active duty, and there is one more that is more common for youth than it is for adults or dislocated worker, and that would be that they're in the foster care system and the foster care system moved them to a different community. If a participant falls into a global exclusion, a hard exit will need to take place, at which time they are no longer a participant. A hard exit is one that you enter with the last date of countable service, and follow-up is not required. I don't even believe it is available for global exits. How about a new enrollment after exit? Oh, go ahead.
I have a question going back to the youth participant enroll in more than one DOL program. Can that, if I create a closure, because the youth I'm working with has completed all the services, they were successful, and if can my can the partner agency can that exceed that 90 days? What if like the job center is working with them and they are like on a 6 month plan, but my services are going to end today? Would that hold me up for the whole 6 months?
Okay, yes. I probably should have addressed that. If you are co-enrolled, you have to be communicating with the other case manager. So if you are co-enrolled with a job center staff member that has added an adult or dislocated worker record, or if you added onto their record, it doesn't matter, it's shared. You have to work together because there's only one closure. And if they're not done providing services, then you can't add the closure. So what you should be doing is communicating with them. We're going to determine who is going to be the last case manager standing, right? So if the youth program is completely done, you don't have other services you can provide, and they are co-enrolled with adult, but the adult program is going to continue to provide services, you can communicate that to your job center partner and say, I've come to the end of what I can do with this youth. It sounds like you've got it from here. I don't foresee that we would need to help them in the future because you've said you could help with this, this, and this. And so you simply would clean up any pieces of your file, make sure all of your dates were accurate and that all of your information was input. And then if course, you would need to communicate to that youth. Your file's still open, but your primary case manager is going to be X, and you're going to keep working with them. And then that primary case manager can contact you and say, hey, it looks like this happened. We're not going to be able to help with this. Can you help with this? And then you might say, all right, I can. And then maybe you open a new service. But if you don't, and you say, I can't help with that, or they end up not needing you again during that time, um, that job center case manager will take it from there. And then when they're done, they'll create the closure and then they can do the follow-ups because it's only one follow-up per quarter. It's not one for youth and then one for adult or dislocated worker. It's just one for the Title I file. So whoever this is, the last case manager providing services should be the one to do those follow-ups. And much of the time, I think you're going to find that it's job center staff. So you want to work with your partners and get to know them and communicate. Also, so you're not double dipping and duplicating services. And so you have less triangulation with that participant. So thank you for bringing that up, Leslie. And did I answer that for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and was there anything in the chat? Nothing? Okay. New enrollment after exit. If a customer's been exited, whether or not they are still in follow-up services, they can apply for services again. If they're in follow-up, explain that follow-up is still required for the previous enrollment and start at the beginning of the inquiry process. So what's new now, basically? So a new enrollment after exit, if they dropped out of training or exited before completing their plan, so maybe they ghosted you or something like that, start by having that open conversation with them. Focus on the understanding of the circumstances that led to the non-completion and how that may have changed, and ask some open-ended questions. What challenges prevented you from completing last time? What's different that makes you feel ready to try again? What specific supports or resources do you think will help you be successful this time? After discussing those aspects, help them to outline concrete steps to stay on track, such as setting clear goals, identify any additional support they need, and agreeing on those regular check-ins to monitor their progress. So we've all been a youth at one point. Many of us have raised children to adulthood or are still in the process of that, and know that life can be messy. Impulse control issues sometimes are happening. Maybe they haven't built a lot of resilience. And the background of each of these youths sometimes can be tricky. And so we want to start fresh, but also reflect on what happened before to move forward. So we don't want to throw things in their face, if you will, and say, well, last time this, but we do want to say what would be different this time as opposed to last time. So we want to reflect, but not dwell in the past. Was there something popping up in the chat? Leslie, are you there? Jay, can you look at the chat? Leslie may have
I
stepped away
am
for a
right here
moment.
with you. Yes, there is a question here.
Okay.
It has to do with slides. I will get it answered, and you can carry on.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up, 4 calendar quarters of follow-up are required for all participants that had an enrollment that soft exited. If at any time during that follow-up, a global exclusion occurs. So they're in follow-up. Maybe they've done 1 or 2 quarters of follow-up, and now one of the global exclusions occurs. You can enter it into the follow-up section, and then it will stop any remaining follow-ups from being required. You can use Sarah, email, phone call, employer contact, in person. All of these sources can be a way to gather that information necessary for follow-up. And it needs to be entered timely within 4 weeks of the required date indicated in Alaska Jobs. The reason that it's only 4 weeks later is that we're going to do a Pearl report and report out to our federal project officers. 4 weeks is the maximum. So the goal is to do it during the quarter and get it done. But if for some reason you didn't, or you were struggling getting in touch with your customer, you do have up to 4 weeks to gather that information for the quarter that was in and get that information entered. Follow-up can be managed by using reports and alerts. And just a reminder of the flow, they're an inquirer. They're maybe doing a pre-assessment or learning about next steps. Then they have an intake and enrollment where there's an assessment, application, eligibility, data validation, development of the ISS. This is where they go from inquirer to participant if that enrollment takes place. Case management, that's all the stuff in between and all the documenting between as they move along in their plan. exit. So there's soft exit or global exclusion, and then follow up for all of those that were in soft exit. Any questions? Shelby, you can unmute.
Okay, sorry, this is my first one. I'm Shelby. I'm from the Literacy Council in Fairbanks. And I just
Okay.
have a question about follow-up. So like you mentioned, you know, if I close a case today, or if a case exits today, it won't show up on follow-up till the next full quarter.
It will
But
show up in follow-up, but you shouldn't.
sorry,
It will show you that the quarter is next calendar quarters as their first follow-up.
right. So when you get to the fourth quarter, you kind of get shorted a little bit, because you can't add services after the hard exit date. I've
I'm
noticed this a couple times. It's been a couple years since I've done it, but one example, I provided a support service for a participant who was in fourth quarter follow-up, but it was like beyond the 1 year exit date, and it wouldn't let me add anything. So I'm just curious if you have tips about how to navigate that.
I do not. I'm not a youth subject matter expert, and for adults and dislocated worker, you cannot provide any services during follow-up. So
Okay.
youth is different like that. So Leslie would need to provide that guidance.
Okay, thank you.
So Leslie, if you'll circle back with Shelby and all, and make sure that they get any guidance they need on how to provide those services and the time limitation on those after exit. Okay. All right, we are going to talk about apprenticeship basics next. This is probably a more abbreviated version than I usually do with apprenticeship, but I know that some of you have youth that are looking towards apprenticeship training. So the goals of this are to understand the basics of registered apprenticeship, how apprenticeship can assist your customers, and I'm not sure, but it could also show your role in promoting this and assisting apprentices, just depending, because I know that my slides that are created for job center staff are a little bit different than these. So the basics of registered apprenticeship. Apprenticeship is a job, and that is one of the primary things to remember, that it is 100% a job. And it has the components of on-the-job learning. Those are those hours that they're doing the learning while they're doing with their mentor. And then also related technical instruction, also known as related instruction, that is pertinent to the occupation they're pursuing. So think about someone who is going to college, and there are a number of courses that they need to take in order to earn a degree, but may not have a specific bearing on the occupation that they're looking to do. So this related technical instruction is focused just on the occupation that they're going to be doing. It is industry and employer driven, structured and monitored by USDOL Office of Apprenticeship in Alaska. We're what they call an OA state. We are monitored by USDOL. We do have our own representatives in Alaska. So many times with federal agencies, we have a West Coast representative that lives in Washington or Oregon. Ours actually live and work in Alaska in Anchorage, and they operate throughout the entire state. It is required for some occupations. So some examples are electrician and plumber. Those are required to be apprenticed. It doesn't matter how much college or vocational school you took, you must apprentice to get a journey level for those jobs and be able to operate as that occupation. And that is generally throughout the US, national requirements. In Alaska, there's a handful of these, like electrician and plumber. that are required to be apprenticed through a number of means, but you have to have what's called a fit card. And that card is an identification that your apprentice applies for, and they pay the Department of Labor, Labor Standards and Safety, I believe, and they are registering to be an apprentice. It's one of the steps that may happen with these occupations where it is required because they are a heavier oversight. They could be time-based, competency-based, or a hybrid between them. They have requirements to earn more money as milestones are met. And that means that the on-the-job learning hours and competencies and the related instruction are in lockstep. So if you have an apprentice and they say, I don't know why I didn't get my raise, and you start asking them some questions and they say, well, I finished all of my book work, they might not have finished enough hours or competencies to be up to where that book work should be, where they get their raise. So that's why we always tell our apprentices, even though you're doing hours at work, you also have to do your related instruction. You need to be dedicating some evenings and weekends, or if it's through a trades organization, they'll send them out once a year. Everyone goes to training at once and does it all over like 4 to 8 weeks. But for those that are doing it correspondence, they have to be coached on doing some training every week in order to stay up on top of it. Any questions so far? Okay.
None in the chat.
Okay. Apprenticeship minimum requirements. I understand the minimum age is 16 years old. That usually has to do with a lot of these occupations may have some occupational restrictions. So if you had a young one that you raised and they wanted to get their first job, if they were 14, 15, or 16, they may have needed you to sign a work permit, and then they may have been restricted to what they could do and what hours they could work. They have to have the right to work in the U.S. and ability to satisfy the sponsor additional minimum requirements if applicable. So that could be any additional education requirements, like if they said you have to have a high school equivalency or diploma, any physical abilities to carry out the tasks, any background check, drug testing, etc. So this can't be minimum requirements that say you're pretty and you wear a braid in your hair. They have to be related to the job or job restrictions. They have to have the ability to successfully complete the on-the-job learning and related technical instruction requirements. The sponsor decides that. We don't. So the sponsor will go through whatever process they do to decide if it appears this person could be successful and carry out these tasks to learn the job. The sponsor may have any number of assessments they do. It could be simply during that time period where they are on probation. They're a probationary apprentice, and they're seeing, does it look like they are working out here and they're doing what they need to do? There are core components. There are 5 for registered apprenticeship. One is that there has to be employer involvement because it's a job. There is structured on the job learning, whether it be by competency, by a number of hours in each type of competency, or demonstrating they can do it. There's the related technical instruction. There's the reward for the skill gains, which means there must be a pay raise happening as they are doing a specific amount of on-the-job learning, hours or competencies, and related instruction. And then the end, they get a national occupational credential. That's a portable credential. USDOL is the authority over it. So they have worked with industry and said, if everyone learns these competencies or puts in this kind of time and then does this related training instruction, does everyone agree that they could be hired in this position? And industry says yes, so it becomes a registered apprenticeship, and they're able to take those that instruction that they had learned and those skills and go to other places to work the job. Any questions so far? Okay. Benefits for job seekers. This is a career. It's a paycheck because it is a job. It's an education. It's hands-on career training. There's a national certification, the portable credentials, and there's opportunities to advance. Studies have shown that many apprentices, especially in the trades organizations, are earning more sooner than college level graduates. Now, that is not to say that college and or vocational school is not valuable, because it absolutely is. It depends on the person, the individual. However, sometimes we see these youths, as we do with adults, that are hands-on learner. They're not good at going to the college and then being turned loose in the middle of the day and then come back later in the day and do another class. They may not have the internal structure to drive them to do their homework. And so sometimes apprenticeship, because it's work and they would rather be doing than listening, and there's less education component, is a better fit. So this is also for those that we consider the realistic learner. So when we talked briefly before about labor market and the RIASEC theory about natural interest tendencies, many of these trades jobs are all realistic. But again, I mentioned trades. Those are only a fraction of our apprenticeships. Benefits for employers: they have skilled employees tailored to those employers' needs. It's a flexible system. So the employer has the ability to, one, give a certain amount of credit if someone has some experience, whether it was apprenticed with someone else or not. And two, they have the ability to say, I'm going to take 10% of this related in technical instruction and change it to be this related technical instruction in the same field, but maybe a different provider, and altering things to be more tailored. There's higher productivity and knowledge transfer. Everyone's learning the same thing. Everyone's going through the same process. Everyone's getting the same related instruction. Everyone gets a mentor, and there's a payroll and training savings cost there, because people tend to stick around and grow with a company if they feel like they're being invested in and they feel like there is support. It is a systematic approach to training. First, we do part A, then we do part B, then we do part C. Then everyone has proved they can do it, and now they get a raise. So it does reduce the turnover rates, which in turn lowers those recruitment costs. It creates a pipeline of skilled workers for when big projects are coming up, and all employees are learning the same skill. So everyone has the same information. We all do it the same. Any questions so far? Okay. Basic employer responsibilities. They need to employ their apprentices full time. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute. I know someone who went to the Carpenters Trust or the IBEW, and they are not dispatched yet, and they got laid off. The goal is for full time, and this presentation is usually towards job center staff who are going to build apprenticeships with single employers. And so we want them to know the goal is that you would employ them full-time year-round, so they can get through their apprenticeship. The program sponsor does not have to also be the employer. And we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, on the next slide. They have to train their apprentices in all the on-the-job learning job tasks. They can't just say, well, in my office, I don't have you do the lab work for dental assistant. I only do that myself. Maybe that's the case, but you still have to train them to do it. And then once they are done with their training period, you can say, nobody gets to use the lab except the doctor or whatever. So they have to have that opportunity to train in all the phases of the occupation. The program sponsor and the training provider They have to determine if the apprentice is training in the RTI courses, so they are responsible for that. Okay, I see you, Jay. I got a 5-minute warning to the break. So it is up to the sponsor to determine, is someone doing their training on time. They have to check in on that. And it is developing a skilled workforce. So the employer has their responsibilities that they sign up with USDOL Office of Apprenticeship, or as an employer under an umbrella, which again we'll get to shortly. Any questions so far? Okay. Here's the different types of apprenticeship sponsors. We have independent non-joint. These are single employers. There's no labor management agreement. This could be a doctor's office, a dentist's office, an electrical or plumbing contractor. It could be any number of an optometrist's office. So there's quite a few different ones. Chiropractor. I mean, there's lots of them that are independent, and they sign up with USDOL as the employer and the sponsor. We call them employer sponsors or INJ. They're independent non-joint. They're in their bubble with their employees. There's no dispatching. There's no stopping to go to training. That's usually happening online evenings and weekends in kind of a correspondence type setting. Then there's independent joint single employers. This is where there is a labor management agreement. Think the Pioneer Homes, which is part of the state of Alaska. Multi-employer sponsors with a labor management agreement. Think IBEW, Teamsters, Alaska Carpenters Training Trust, Local 302 operating engineers. Those are the ones where they are a sponsor and they have multiple employers under them, and all of the employers that sign up agree that these people during this time will earn X dollars per hour and they will be trained in these many hours in these types of competencies. And then if it's once a year, we'll go ahead and lay them all off so they can attend the training that the sponsor is going to provide. And that's from 4 to 8 weeks, usually in Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Juneau is where this takes place. And then they are redispatched many times to the same employer. And then we have the multi-employer sponsor with no labor management agreement. This is like Associated Builders, building contractors, and APCA. So there's no labor management agreement, but they do have multiple employers signed up under one sponsor. So the sponsor is required for vetting the employees and saying, yes, this person meets what we would say is the minimum requirements through whatever assessment method we did, or if we did a drug test or whatever we did. And we're going to keep track of their related technical instruction. And you, as the employer, when we dispatch them out to you, will follow all of the rules and keep track of their hours and report them to us. Maybe it's monthly, maybe it's every pay period, maybe it's quarterly, depending on what their agreements are. Any questions so far? So who, when we first started talking about apprenticeships, was immediately thinking of multi-employer sponsors where they get dispatched? Maybe they're part of a union, and thinking just about those trades ones. Who thinks that was the first thing on their brain when they started hearing that we were going to talk about apprenticeship? You can raise your hand or do a react or unmute. Okay, Shelby. Lisa. Yeah. Many years ago, that's what I thought too. I thought, well, that's what I thought apprenticeship was. If you think about apprenticeship, the original apprenticeship started with well, if I want to go back and say the original apprenticeship, it was in the dark ages, and we had someone who ran a mill, and then they taught their son to run the mill, and they worked on the job doing the thing, and they learned whatever they were supposed to learn along the way. Or you had your blacksmith, and they taught their son or their son-in-law, and that's how it went. But if you look at really the institution of apprenticeship, it's the military. the military is by far the closest thing to starting apprenticeship than anywhere. You're doing the things on the job and you're learning whatever training is necessary to complete the task. I see that we are going on break. Please come back at 3:15 and we will rejoin our apprenticeship discussion.